Hello guys, welcome back. This video is a quick update on my progress on the HobbyBoss 1/72 scale Dora. I have been working a lot on this video in the last few weeks, but not everything that I've done is particularly exciting video. Most of my work has been basically repeating the stuff in the previous video, but for the other side of the railgun. So that work is now done, and then it was a case of adding in the final few details and preparing everything for paint. Before I begin, let me say a huge thank you to my Patreon supporters for their ongoing and continued support, and a special welcome to my latest Patreon, David Larkin, who has joined this month. Thank you guys, thank you all of you for your support, it's greatly appreciated. So when we left these large gun support pieces in the last video, they were looking quite bare. One of the things that needs adding is these pipes here. At first I wasn't sure whether or not to add them now or later, because it would be quite hard to get paint behind them on the back side of those pipes. But equally, you don't really want to be gluing painted pieces together too much, so I did decide to add them in. You can see here I'm just dry fitting these pieces. There is a bit of cleanup to do on some of these pipes. I'm just showing you at the moment how they'll go in place. And I think that adds a lot more detail to these pieces, which were looking a bit sparse before. The pipes are quite flexible in terms of their position. I was tempted to superglue them into place to the side here, but I think in reality I'll at least wait until I've painted them before deciding what to do. With those pipes in place, these two pieces are more or less complete. As we saw in the previous video, the gun barrel rests between these. The length of the barrel there will counter the weight in the breech. One thing that does need to be added, but it will have to wait until after painting, is this platform at the front. This is obviously really important because you need to get the correct width for these two pieces, but of course their width depends on the pieces below them, so we can't really add anything there yet. I did need to make a couple of enlargements here for this support bracket. They don't fit very well out of the box. And if you don't get that positioned correctly, the platform ends up sloping upwards away from these pieces, which is not what you want. Finally, we have these side brackets here with a platform that goes on top. Again, I'm always thinking about painting here and ease of painting, so this platform is not going to be glued in place until after the painting. If I put it in place now, it would be just too hard to get behind it to get the paint down. One of the challenges on this kit is definitely going to be the seam cleanup, especially on the round pieces. So these pieces here go above and below the barrel of the gun, and you can see there's quite a lot of work needs to be done there on the seams. These two large beams were something that I worked on in the last video. Since then I've given them a coat of black on the inside so that no light will leak through. And then it's a case of gluing them together and removing that seam line there. And of course it's much better to remove the seam line once everything's together and you can just lay it flat on a piece of sandpaper. On the side of those beams we're supposed to add these brackets. There's quite a lot of them, they go in these holes here. But if we look at the sprue, almost every single one of them was broken on the sprue, which is quite annoying. I would imagine those that are not broken would probably break when I tried to cut them off if you look at the size of those sprue gates. So I haven't decided yet whether I'm going to leave those off completely, try to repair them, or make my own. So really the common theme of this video is preparing sub-assemblies for paint and planning for that. So those two beams go here like so. They have that cabin kind of suspended between them at the back. And they have this platform on top. Now there's not a lot of guidance as to exactly how this platform should go. You can see there's clearly a bit of underhang there, but there's no positive guidance. There's no pins or anything like that to line things up. There's only these sort of C-shaped brackets here, and they're not very good. So what I had to do is take one of the beams, lock it into place as best I could on that C-shaped bracket, and glue it, basically lining it up with that line on the base piece, just to get that one into place. And that shows us roughly how much we should have there as the underhang. I can't put the other beam in place yet because this cabin hangs from between them, and if I put everything in place now, again, we wouldn't be able to get paint in there. We wouldn't be able to get paint on the underside of that platform or onto the top of the cabin. I've also been spending my time making a few of the smaller pieces, the accessories. So we have the shells here. They have their sprue gates on the adjoining edge, which is not the easiest place to have them. But really the best thing to do is just to cut them down mostly and then lay the piece flat on some sandpaper and sand it down that way. As you can see though, the seam lines there will need a little bit of work as well. We also have these trolleys, which are just a few parts put together to hold those shells. And they are lifted up from the, from ground level to the top of the gun on these lift pieces here. Again, it's a quite simple construction. A platform, two side pieces and a top piece. There are ejector pin marks here in quite an annoying place. They have to go on the outside because these pieces are not symmetrical. So I reduced them as much as I could, but they are still slightly visible. And basically those lifts are raised up and down by these pieces here. Basically we have this winch, a piece of string, which, I don't know, I feel like I might want to replace with some chain, and then a hook on the end. These are not workable, movable parts, so you just basically decide how long you want the string to be. Unfortunately I made mine the same length, so I might go back and change that as I say. And then the whole mechanism goes together like so. There are a couple more detailed pieces to go on too, such as this piece here. I'm not quite sure what this is, but it goes on top of the main gun platform. Again, thinking ahead to painting, and I'm going to need to leave this part separate so I can get paint underneath it. Otherwise you can see through it to the deck there, and you're going to see that orange tan plastic. The ladders were some of the more fiddly parts of the construction. Some of them were like this, moulded all as one piece, nice and easy. Some of them were moulded like this, where you have to add every individual rung to the side and then try to make the other side line up. It's quite a fiddly job, and it's quite easy to do what I've done here and accidentally rotate the side there and make everything come out. Again, they are very delicate, so they're going to be left off until the last minute. Talking of delicate, there are lots and lots of rails on the Dora. For the majority of these, what I've done is cut them off the sprue and left them attached only by the sprue gates where paint is not going to go. So here on the bottom, for example, there's going to be glue there, so I can leave those attached, clean up the other sprue gates and give them a paint like so, making sure I label them because there are lots of pieces that look the same. It was also time to add some of the smaller pieces to the wagons. These were left off for obvious reasons at the beginning, and even now, once I added them, by the time I've made this video, I've already knocked about half of them off. They're very delicate and very easy to catch. I did decide to put the rails for the wagons in place because I felt they were a bit more protected and they would be fairly easy to paint. It's quite easy to rotate the wagon in your hand to get the paint around the rails. It's a lot harder to rotate the main gun pieces, which are nearly 2 feet long. The final job I wanted to do was to make sure that everything fits together quite nicely and lays flat. A couple of my subscribers have told me that they built the Dora and that was a big problem for them, getting everything to go nicely together on the rail bed. So I took the rail pieces You can see here they've got quite a few thick sprue gates on every single rail, so it took a lot of time to cut them off and clean them up. But I put the rail pieces down and just tried with the 3 wagons that make up each corner to make sure everything was okay. One thing I noticed is they do sit nice and flat at the moment, like so. However, if you do give them just a small touch, those lower 2 wagons spring off the rails quite quickly. But I realised there was quite a simple explanation for this, and it was basically to do with the joint between the lower and the upper wagons here. It's very tight. You can see that I'm struggling even to remove it now. And of course the paint's been taken off the bottom side of that. So a very simple fix was to make this hole in the lower wagons a little bit wider. I just used a hobby knife to do that. And once I did that, you can see here, it's not perfect, but now if we give that upper wagon a wiggle, it moves on its own now without making those lower wagons spring off the rails. So that was really useful. So that was something I did all around, because of course if you're putting those big gun pieces on top of this, that's really going to cause those upper wagons here to move a bit, and you don't want everything moving in sympathy. Finally, it was time to do some test painting. You might remember that Scale Models HQ, who were kind enough to send me the Dora, sent me the stencils as well. They sent me this stencil here, which will be useful later for scratches and for damage to the wagons and so on. But the one I'm interested in right now is this one here. This is really intended as a post shading stencil, I think, but I'm going to try it in a different way. I thought if I used it now and put some white paint through it, I could almost treat it like a combination of the mottling technique and the black and white technique. So that's exactly what I did. I put some paint through here. This one was with the stencil quite close to the model, so you can see quite sharp edges there on the white areas. This one was with it further away, and you can see there it's got a much softer edge to it. I did a similar thing with the upper wagon there as well, both on the top and on the sides. And then I laid down a fairly thin, or I tried to keep fairly thin, coat of AK Real Colours Dunkelgrau, which is 257 if I remember correctly. It's gone down nice and flat, and if you look carefully at certain angles, you can just see the effect there. This is the hard-edged one. Probably a little bit too hard-edged, I think. It looks a bit funny. It reminds me of icebergs floating in the sea, actually. Not quite the effect I was looking for there. Unfortunately, the soft edge one, I put the paint down a bit too thick, so I lost the effect completely. So I'm looking for a combination of the two, I think, for when I make the next ones. But you know, we live and learn, that's why we practice these things. Another thing to look at here is this seam on the edge. It looks horrible. The acrylic putty that I put in from AK has shrunk quite a lot. I have also done quite a bad job of sanding that, so that needs fixing as well before I proceed, before I steam ahead. But nevertheless, I think as a sort of prototype corner, this doesn't look too bad. Obviously I'll put some post shading on here after with some lighter colours of grey as well. And of course we've got some wooden colour to go on the back. There are a couple of areas that I missed as well. There's a slight showing of orange coming through for the plastic, so they'll be touched up as well. But as I say, this was just an experiment before I go loose on the entire model. So guys, that was my update to the Dora build. It was quite an itty bitty video with lots of sort of random pieces being put together, but that's just the nature of the kit. You know, once you get to sort of the 95% point of the build, it's just lots of small details to do. I've already started doing a lot more work on this since this video, so I've already addressed that ugly seam line, for example, on all the other wagons. So in my next video, we should really just see a bit of cleanup, and then it should be painting the Dora. I'm not going to do anything with the base, not even the rails, until I've got the Dora itself painted, and then it will be a separate video where I basically make essentially a diorama for that. So guys, I hope you enjoyed that video. Do keep an eye out for the updates. If you haven't already, then you can of course hit the subscribe button to get notified of those updates. My next video is almost ready, and it is a resurrection of a kit that I started back in October, I think. So keep an eye out for that. I had lots of fun building that one. And until next time, take care and have fun modelling.